Hello, everybody. I'm Max Kennel. I'm the director and editor at Pandora Press, based in Hamilton, Ontario. And we're here today with Braden Matthew. We're going to interview him about his book Solarium in just a moment, but I'll give a little background on the press first before I introduce our guest. So Pandora Press was founded in the mid 1990s at Conor Grable University College by C. Arnold Snyder, who's a professor of history there. And over the decades, it has shifted and changed, and it's been known for and remains known for studies in Anabaptist and Mennonite history and theology. Now, in the past few years, since I took over as director in 2021, we've been moving in interesting new literary directions. We have a new series called Pandora Poetica, which now has 3 volumes. We just launched the third volume by Otto Sellas from Calvin. We launched it last Monday, and it's called Matin, and it's a gorgeous reflection on finitude and morning prayers with oil paintings and photographs from his colleagues. So check that out. As Pandora Press consolidates its place in the Anabaptist and Mennonite studies world, at the very same time, it is moving in brand new literary and poetic directions. So later in the year, we will be proud to publish John Weir's experimental autobiographical novel Runaway, a novel that Braden has read and has had wonderful thoughts on. So with that in mind, this today's interview is going to cover a really unique book that Braden authored several years ago, which was first released by Corona Samizdat in a fascinating squarish format. These copies
Oh, you
are,
have the original.
I
Oh my
do, I
goodness.
do. These copies are rare now. So now that Pandora has published a reprint of the book, those will just increase in value and perpetuity.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's exciting to see both versions.
Well, yeah, I have the proof copy of the new edition,
Go
which has
for it.
the not for resale sticker on it, but it still gives you a glimpse of how gorgeous the cover is.
Yeah. Do you mind saying just a little bit about the artist? I know that you have a connection with him.
Yeah, yeah. So I have a bit of a hobby. I review books on Instagram, on a bookstagram, and through that, I've networked with all sorts of amazing writers and artists, painters, other book reviewers. And there's a man named a psychiatrist and surrealist painter named Kieran Forster. He's in Brisbane, Australia, and he has painted the front cover of this book, Solarium. He's done an amazing job. I'm a huge fan of his art. Yeah, Kieran is a good friend and colleague. I would say we go back and forth. I'm a psychotherapist and he's a psychiatrist, and we often chat therapy to each other and fiction, which is quite fun.
That's brilliant. And that leads pretty well into your introduction. I mean, at least a bivocational person as a Canadian living and a multi-geographical person. You're Canadian living in Edinburgh, Scotland. You're a psychotherapist and a novelist at the same time, and I assume neither at the expense of the other, both enriching each other. And Braden and I got to know each other a little bit when we overlapped in the religious studies department at McMaster University. We share a supervisor in Travis Craker, who we recently published a Festschrift for called Messianic Imagination. That's out with Cascade. And so, Braden holds this BA in religious studies with the MA in philosophy and a master's in counseling and psychotherapy. And so, Solarium is his properly debut novel. And later in the interview, we're going to hear a little bit more about his forthcoming work, The Devil's Workshop. And I think there's an atmospheric character to both. I'd be curious to hear, Braden, what you see as the continuities in your voice between the two, and what the major differences are. Um, so let's get started. I mean, Solarium is a complicated book. It has plot twists. It moves in different voices, and I think it resists easy summary. But I wonder if you can start us off by giving us a few sentence overview, maybe for the benefit of the first time reader. Like every story has a story arc,
Yeah.
beginning, middle, and end. But I wonder if you might give that overview and then reflect on like what are you doing with genre? Are you Are you within the genre of the novel? Are you playing with the
Mm.
typical narrative movements of tension or resolution? Share with us.
Yeah, yeah. I think the easiest way to describe Solarium as in terms of genre would probably be a metafictional postmodern novel. What does that mean? The best way to describe that, well, I'll use a couple of examples. When I was writing Solarium, I was reading Pale Fire by Vladimir Nabokov, um, and that's a book that is, in its almost near entirety, a foreword to a 999 line poem with some footnotes and an afterword which questions the voice of the person who wrote the foreword. So the whole book is all contesting voices over one sort of very, very minimal content, which is the poem itself. Um, I would say Solarium mimics this kind of way of writing. The opening of the book in Solarium opens with you, the reader, opening a package in the mail when you order it from Pandora Press off of Amazon. And you're opening the book. And so it sort of mimics also, Italo Calvino does this in his book, If on a Winter's Night a Traveler, where he's writing about you, the reader, picking up the book in the bookstore. And he breaks that wall where the reader then becomes the protagonist of the book. Now, my book does this a little bit different than Calvino's book, where in my world, you're sort of in an alternative universe where it's a dystopia. So you let's just say it's Max. Max is opening the box with the Pandora Press, and it's in a dystopian world. But it's actually not sent from Pandora. It's sent from a secret society called the Society of Bibliophiles, or called the SOB in the book. And this is a resistance movement which is trying to resist an invention called the human theater, which is kind of like VR, but it's made with an incision inside your head, and it taps into all of the senses, and it's an aphrodisiac, so it kind of accesses all of your desires and channels that through these different uh, algorithmic channels. They basically take all of the desires that you could possibly have, make it into your own personalized VR, and what ends up happening is that those who can afford this, the wealthy enough, get paralyzed into a state of constant consumption, constant desire, constant content consuming, and they basically excrete and vomit themselves to death, uh, which is not a pretty picture in the book. And I'm making it, I'm sort of making light of what really happens in the book. But this one person ends up unplugging for just a moment. Their family is half dead in the room, zombified in the room beside them, and they pick up this book and they forget what a book is. Oh my God, what is a book? It's an artifact in this world. And then they begin to read, and the story you're reading is a story of a person who is addicted to reading books. And it was used as a propaganda piece against to ward off people reading. It's sort of like Fahrenheit 451 and these kinds of dystopian novels. My own kind of take on it, I suppose. I don't think I need to say too much more about it. There's a lot more that goes into the meta parts of the book, but I'll just
And
leave
that
it there.
that's an excellent teaser for the reader who like I don't think readers will expect coming in cold such self-reflexivity and such meta-narrative framing in a novel. But I think like when you get into it, that's the delight and the excellence of the book. And there is disorientation in it. I'm sure that readers will struggle at times to find their way, but that is like the worthy piece of it.
And it's a novel that makes fun of itself.
Yeah, yeah.
It's dark political satire that tries to show how both the left and the right, if taken too far, can be a dangerous place to be. But it does this in a very, very funny way, and I would say I make fun of myself. I sort of exaggerate the self and make fun of that.
And that's important. Like I think that that's an essential part of self-reflexivity. We have to be able to laugh at ourselves. Have to, a part of self-critique is, being able to be vulnerable enough to put yourself on display and to say, this is ridiculous. Look at all this.
Yeah.
I wondered, like, so my second question for you is, when I work with authors, every author who comes in, from the academic ones to the memoir writers who we publish at Pandora, to the more poetic and literary voices, everyone is writing out of their own experiences and to a certain degree, whether at far remove or very close in the case of a memoir. All art imitates life, but with a difference. And clearly, this novel is drawing from your own experiences, your own wrestling with yourself, your desires. I wonder if you would put a fine point on it and tell us like what's one thing you share deeply with Bib, the main character, and where's one point where you diverge, where you are different.
Mm, oh, that's a good question. Mm. I'm probably a bit more self-aware, and maybe that just comes with being an omniscient writer. Uh, whereas he's my character.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit more aware than he is. But Bib is a short form for bibliophile. Um, his actual name is a different name in the book, but it's what people call him throughout the book, and it's how he refers to himself in the book. Um, and I started thinking about this when I was writing the first chapter of the book, which it's funny to talk about the book because I wrote the book I started writing the book about 7 years ago now. So even just reading through it again, I'm kind of remembering parts of why I wrote it and how I wrote it, and it's interesting to kind of reflect on that time. Um, so bibliophile, the first chapter is called pathetic. No, formal diagnosis on a pathetic sapien. I think it's something like that.
Yeah.
And it was sort of my attempt at kind of comedic autofiction. I am a very strange individual that just so happens to read and walk at the same time. And I get a lot of people commenting on this when I'm walking on the street and reading my book in my hand. And it's always been such a funny thing because people walk and on their phones at the same time as well. But it seems weirder when you're doing it when you're reading. And I remember getting a lot of comments about this when I was studying at Mac actually, because I would walk through the forest trail there, and people walking down the trail just reading. People would make comments, and it made me start thinking, but why do I read so? I was reading so much at the time. I wouldn't put my book down anywhere, and for probably 10 years, I would read even while filling up my gas in my car at a gas station. It's a bit embarrassing to say, but that's how much I read. So I was like, there's this really weird, absurd thing about myself. I want to investigate this.
Yeah.
And I came to the conclusion that I was probably just trying to escape from boredom, escape from my own feeling of melancholy, my own experience of probably forms of existential despair. And it was the equivalent of people who maybe are scrolling on TikTok. And I think that there was maybe a pride. I was like, oh, maybe I'm better than these people because at least I'm not on TikTok. And so then it became the whole conversation of the book became one around, how am I escaping from my reality? Perhaps there are different ways to escape from our reality, and perhaps we can get too sucked into these simulations that we forget that some of them are just mediations,
Yeah.
and they can't end up being full simulations. And so the book kind of dives into the sacred middleness of books, that we can't find our way to make the book our whole reality, but it has to be a way to reintroduce us to reality.
Uh,
And so that's one of the main ideas that comes out of my own personal experience.
that is profound. I mean, the notion that a book as media, as a mediating object, reintroducing us to reality when it's at its best, it is doing that. I mean, books, like any media, can distract and take
Yeah.
our attention away from where we ought to attend. Um, I think that's profound. I identify a great deal with that. I mean, this is a book about bibliophilia, right? This extreme love of books. And I
Yeah.
share that with you when I'm running Pandora Press. I'm thinking about this all the time. Like, what is this drive toward wanting to publish more? I think Gabriel Zaid writes in his book called So Many Books back in '06, English translation in '06, that like there was a book at that time, a book was being published once every 30 seconds around the world. It's only increased. And so why continue to push this thing? Is print not dead, and so
Yeah.
on and so forth. And like you and I share this love for maximalist literature. We've been talking about Carlos Fuentes' book Terra Nostra, about Schadenfreude,
And
uh,
fro, yeah.
about the books of Jacob. Like there's just so many of these brilliant maximalist pieces, like going back to Moby Dick, which I know we both studied with
Mm.
Travis Great Graham McMaster. And these books reflect something of human desire, and they bring paradoxes with them. And you can definitely love books too much. I've been guilty of that with my 3,000 volume library, carting that around the province. I wonder if you might reflect a little bit on, a little more on what are the paradoxes of bibliophilia that extend outward from the book. I mean, like the character changes, the main character changes, learns lessons and stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, actually, before I answer that, what you're saying, it kind of makes me think Philip Roth had predicted that people would stop reading books within the next like 50 years, completely, which is actually not true. More people are reading books than they ever have in human history.
Yeah,
I think I was thinking about these kinds of things, people reading less and less. And in Canada, when I was living in Canada, because now I'm currently living in Scotland, I remember thinking, if you're not in the university context, you're probably not reading. Most of the people I knew weren't reading. Um, they would listen to music, they would watch television, watch films, but they weren't reading. And one of the most refreshing things when I moved to Edinburgh was that this is one of the biggest book festivals in the world. Big readers here. You go to a cafe, people are reading, left and right, and it's just very interesting. Um, but anyway, so back to your question. Can you repeat the question for me? I
yeah.
just
Oh,
was
I think
thinking.
you're getting to it, right? Like the paradoxes of bibliophilia are really interesting, right? Like we assume reading is going away, and we hear this, but then it's like religion that way. It differentiates, it moves into different spheres. There are brand new reading publics that like were unknown, several years ago. I think the advent of like Kindle and digital publishing does this too. But like
Yeah,
loving books, I mean, maybe it's a different question about like, if you love books, what do you love? Like what is it? And if books are a way to escape, maybe you love escape. If books are a way to reintroduce you to reality, to reconnect you with people, author,
okay.
publisher, reader.
This is going to be a very, I don't know if this is going to be a very strange way to answer your question. Um, I think that reading fiction, well, I'll answer it theologically and then I'll answer it psychotherapeutically.
Perfect.
The theological answer, I would say, is the universal has to access us through the particular.
Mm,
And that's the importance of incarnation. And I think that's also how consciousness works. So if I want to sit with a client and understand them, it's easier for me to listen to their story, the characters of their life, the context of their life, how it feels when they wake up in the morning, how it feels, what's the first thought on their mind. Novels do this in a really, really profound way. Uh, Novels teach us how people remember, how people experience um, love and heartbreak and tragedy and um, and and travel. I mean, the list goes on. Novel is the landscape of etc. It's, I mean,
It's
yeah,
it's incredible. That reminds me of Jan Fosse of the septology, this enormous stream of consciousness, single sentence book that's just impenetrable, but at the same time when you enter into it, you meet him. Like you suddenly know the repetitive concatenations of how he thinks.
yeah,
And that encounter is the incarnation of something.
yeah,
And
and
it gives you access to the universal.
it gives you access to the universal, and it gives us access to ourselves because most people don't have the language that can equip them with communicating their feelings. As a therapist, I see this all the time. Um, I was reading Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's book. She's a Nigerian writer, and she had a book about grief. And it was she's a fiction writer though. And you hear people talk about when they lose somebody, they say they feel sad, they feel um, they feel horrible, they feel miserable, but these don't quite articulate how they really are feeling.
Yeah.
And I remember she had a line in that book. It was a book about her dad dying during the pandemic, and it was like when she breathed, it felt like glass in her throat. It felt like inhaling sand. And there's just something about metaphor that allows us access to something, and that's mediation. Metaphor is mediation, and the same way that books are mediation. We need something to mediate from my heart to your heart. And I think that's why books are still important. It's the same reason why visual paintings are important and cinema is important, why art needs to be important still.
Yeah, no, that's a helpful answer. That like I identify a great deal with that. I feel that in the sense that when in my editing work with Pandora, when in publishing, I know that it's going well, it's doing what it should do when it's connecting people, right? When you
Mm,
publish something, you make it public. Like you take something that it was private, you articulate it in language using words that will always, to a certain degree fail. But when you publish, you make public, and then it's out there. And once mediated, like the promise of all of this is that people become more connected, more sympathetic, and more, ideally more compassionate. And so I think like the promise of your book of Solarium in its very, bracing way of confronting the self with the self, like I think a lot of the promise is that it helps us avoid that escapism. Like we all spend our lives trying to understand ourselves and others, and we seek, in theological religious terms, we seek saviors. In, to use another term, we seek escape, or we have anything can be a means of avoidance. And so I wonder if
mm.
you might speak to those theological, philosophical, religious dynamics of escapism that you get at in the book.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I think this is probably a good moment to read from the book. Um, one section, if that's okay. Is that
Please,
okay?
please.
It's a section where Bib is part of the book has Bib writing these scribblings of dreams. Um, and I know that Henry James once said, "Write a dream, lose a reader," and that's probably true. So I'm sorry to all the readers that get lost when I write all these dreams. But within peppered within the dreams are all of these sort of philosophical and theological and psychological ruminations on escapism and dystopia and kind of the state of the world. A lot of it was, informed by the pandemic about how we approach technology and isolation pandemic. So I'll read this one. It's about a page or so, a little bit over a page. Every body must be fled. So goes the ancient Neoplatonic philosopher Porphyry, at least according to what St. Augustine tells us. And in what civilization and epoch of human history is Porphyry's mantra not proclaimed? Did not Descartes, that forerunner of modernity, suggest that the mind is a sailor in the ship of the body, a vessel that one day we must disembark? And the Gita, does it not also state the body is perishable and so should be warred with for the sake of that indestructible, imperishable, and immeasurable soul within? We harangue our hormones for the sake of heaven, banish the body for the sake of the beyond, and it is toilsome. Angels, according to St. Augustine, are on the other hand pure noesis, that is, they are pure intelligence, disembodied mental beings. They have no need to flee their bodies for the sake of the soul. Resembling humans, they can enjoy the pleasures of the world, such as eating, sleeping, talking, and drinking, but being ontologically of another order, they cannot suffer change, loss, guilt, death, or shame. Is it any surprise, then, that Augustine's castigation of Porphyry is exactly pointed at Porphyry's attempt at trying to be like an angel, noetic at the expense of the nerves? Descartes, too, falls flat on his face in the silly attempt to become an angel without limbs, a floating antibody, to know the essence of all things, absolutely and undoubtedly, without the baggage of the senses weighing him down. Could this be all we have ever wanted? To be plump, chubby cherubim, floating in the clouds, no longer dealing with guilt, suffering, and death, our eyes ever facing toward the eternal good, our backs toward the shadowy ramshackle of earth. How nice it all sounds. How hard we work, composing scriptures and literature and music to the great and glorious angeloid. That is what we have become, angeloids. And angeloids are everywhere. They are my neighbors, professors, librarians, aunts and uncles, presidents, clergy, monks, taxi drivers, doctors, janitors, and gardeners. They assume every stratosphere of society. They live among us, following the secret cult of angelism, whose tradition reduces being to consciousness at the expense of flimsy enfleshment, who silences the stomach when it roars with hunger, who masks their skin with perfumes and cosmetics, who vegetate before screens, books, billboards, theaters, ads, magazines, comics, apps, content. Oh God, so much content. And before they know it, they have been severed from their bodies and can no longer feel their fingers, hovering about with floating heads that munch and munch with gaping mental mouths on the sample-sized tasters of the ceaseless scrolling content.
Beautiful. That, I mean, we are adrift in an ocean of content, and this interview will become part of that. There's an inevitability about
Sure,
it, but
we're culpable now.
we are, and that's another thing I love about your book is like there is no moral purity to be found here. We're in it and inside of it all, and I think there is something, like you said, I mean, metaphor, image, simile, all these things mediate and they bring us closer. And this notion that we would be attempting to become angelic, it plays on images with uh,
Yeah,
deep theological roots. I wonder
but
with the
fundamentally anti-Gnostic.
yes, yeah,
It suggests that we're all of us are just trying to be angels, and that's the problem. We're not trying to be humans anymore. We're trying to be angels.
and its commitment to finitude, to human limits, to the remembrance of death. It's clear, and it's one of its virtues. With the a few minutes left, I wonder if we might turn from the angelic to the satanic and discuss the title and promise of your next book. So this book was your first, this is your debut in a way, but there's another book coming out next year called The Devil's Workshop. What does it mean to work with the devil in the workshop there? I mean, Satan is the accuser, the one who points the finger. Do you, I wonder, with the finger pointed at you right now, um, what are the continuities between these two works, and
Yeah,
what are you trying to do that's different in the Devil's Workshop? I know there's a difference in form. We could start there.
yeah, yeah. There's a very big difference in form. I mean, the title comes from an old Catholic adage, which I think I'm going to butcher right now, but it's something like an idle mind is the devil's workshop.
Yeah, yeah, that's it.
And the idea is that, well, this actually gets into answering your question. The idea is that we sort of, that a wandering mind that's allowed to sort of free associate in the Freudian sense, and pay attention to non-attention, will get into trouble, and it will fall into types of um, lusts and temptations and regrets and um, horrors of the past. And what the book ends up becoming is a sort of stream of consciousness of my narrator's life, a life that has been one filled with grief. And so the name of The Devil's Workshop is the name of a novella. The book itself is a short story collection and a novella, all of them which deal with the topic of grief. And it's come out of my personal experience, and it's come also out of the experience of me being a therapist to many clients who deal with grief, and who I sit with in their grief. All of the stories take place in different cities, from Paris to Montreal, Copenhagen, Budapest, and they're all different characters who deal with grief in different ways.
It's the tapestry of approaches to the ripping and shredding and tearing of letting go, and then on the other side of grief, once one stops trying to escape it, there is a great beauty, and I think I'm certain readers will find that down the
And
road.
it's still very theological. There's a lot to, if you have any fans Rene Girard and his views on mimetic desire, scapegoating, and the satanic. Uh, there might be something in there for them as well.
I think they'll find it well. I mean, the part of the to zoom out a little bit back to the press, like it's fascinating to have about 150 titles on our backlist, and the majority of those are by and about Mennonites, a peace church tradition who's very invested in the critique of redemptive violence, the critique of the notion that repaying violence for violence fixes anything. Girard is a huge part of that. There is some minor engagement by Mennonites with Girard. And
Mm.
I think the literary form is one of the most ideal ways of getting to that, those dynamics of sacrifice. So,
Yeah.
I mean, much to look forward to in your future work. You also have a book of poetry out there. We'll let readers dig around for that.
Yeah,
Um,
don't too much. I'm definitely not a poet.
I wonder if readers will disagree upon reading the poetic character of your reflections.
Mm.
But I want to end with some praise for Solarium, right? This is an erudite study of the self and the world. I recognize in it some of our shared language that we learned at McMaster in the religious studies program, that we learned from some of the literary voices we mentioned in this. And the book,
Mm.
I mean, it speaks to the most human experiences of shame and guilt and desire, transgression, turning away, turning towards. And so I want to encourage people who are listening to go buy the book on Amazon. Complicit as we are with the Amazon system, Pandora does subsist on it right now. Best way to support the press, best way to support Braden's literary activities with this book is to go and purchase it on Amazon. It's available worldwide. Um, and it is one of a number of titles that we're putting out this year. Your book, Braden, is in exciting and good company. John Weir's novel will come out soon, Runaway. We have a book on the Swiss Anabaptists where Christian Scheidegger, the city archivist, assistant archivist in the city of Zurich, reflects on some of the large scale implications of some of what we've talked about for democracy
Mm.
and in the West. Um, Many more exciting books to come. We got a memoir coming out soon by Dan Shank and Joyce Maxwell. Keep an eye out for that. And Dion Martin's book um, has just come out as well. So, Braden, thanks for joining the company of these strange and disparate Mennonite writers and bringing your unique literary voice to it. We're excited about the next book, and we're excited about what we can hear from you next. I'll give you the last word. What are you excited about next?
I just thank you for bringing me into this fold, and um, very honored to be amongst such great other writers. I think John Weir is such a fantastic writer. I'm looking forward to buying his book when it comes out because it's such a marvel to read. What am I looking forward to? More reading. I'm reading Life and Fate by Vasily Grossman. Uh, it's another one of these maximalist novels. Highly recommend for anybody who's interested in. Uh, they call it the War and Peace of Soviet Russia.
Brilliant.
Um, there you go. That's a
So
good one.
fitting, so fitting to end with a book recommendation of some
Yeah, yeah,
manageable size.
yeah.
Thank you, Braden, and thanks to all of those who have stuck with us to listen to this through. Go buy the book, and thank you for your support of authors like Braden and the press. Take
Mhm.
care, everybody.
Thank you, Max.